The day I walked outside and found my water pressure dead silent, I thought it was just a busted valve. But when I dug up the access point near my curb, I didn't find a clog. I found concrete poured directly into my main line. At first, I thought it was random vandalism. Then I found the HOA's violation notice duct taped to my garage door. Unauthorized use of non-compliant irrigation. Corrective measures applied. Corrective measures? Turns out, the board had taken it upon themselves to fill my water line with cement, thinking it would punish me for not landscaping to code. But there was just one thing they didn't know. That pipe? It didn't just serve my house. It supplied half the block, and the second the water stopped, so did their power. There's something comforting about the sound of water when it's doing what it's supposed to do. The morning rush of the kitchen faucet, the low hum of the sprinkler heads cycling through their arc, even the satisfying hiss of a pressure washer peeling off a layer of driveway dust. It's the kind of background peace you don't notice until it disappears. For me, that peace came in the form of an old but dependable underground water system on my property, original to the house, but upgraded over time. The plumbing ran quiet, the pressure stayed strong, and the bill was always predictable. In a neighborhood managed by an HOA that loved to meddle, that was a blessing. I had bought the house 5 years earlier, not for prestige or proximity to downtown, but for the lot itself. Bigger than the others, slightly elevated, and most important, it had its own irrigation system that didn't rely on the HOA's collective landscaping contract. It was a small freedom in a community where even mailbox paint had to be approved. I like things my way. The yard wasn't perfectly manicured, but it was neat. No há estrutura, no plástico edges, no há sanzioni, gravel paternis. Just real grass, native plants, and a rain barrel that fed the flower beds. That's when the problems started. At first, it was passive. Notes tucked under the doormat. Your yard may not comply with current HOA uniformity guidelines. Reminder, only approved irrigation systems are permitted. Request, please match landscaping to community standards. Then came the citations. Handwritten warnings about unauthorized irrigation heads and non-compliant water pressure timing. The HOA president, a woman named Karen, of course, claimed my system disrupted aesthetic cohesion. I shrugged it off. It was my property, and I had paperwork showing the irrigation lines predated the HOA charter. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Every time I mowed my lawn or turned on my sprinklers, it felt like someone was watching. One time I caught Karen herself standing across the street with a clipboard, pretending to inspect a bush while she stared at my water meter box. Still, I didn't react. I made sure everything was legal. No leaks, no code violations, nothing out of line with the city. I wasn't about to tear up working infrastructure just because an HOA committee thought a pop-up rotor head looked unsightly. But then, something changed. It started with the sound, or rather, the lack of it. One Saturday morning, I turned on the outside tap to wash off a dusty shovel, and nothing. Just a faint sputter. No pressure. No water. I checked the kitchen sink. Same thing. The shower? Dry. The irrigation controller read, open, but the system wasn't responding. I assumed it was a city issue, maybe a main line repair or temporary shutoff. I walked down to the curbside box to check my valve. That's when I noticed it. The cover had been tampered with. Not just shifted, removed, replaced, and rescrewed, but at a slight angle, like whoever had done it wasn't familiar with the shape of the box. That's when the dread set in. I unscrewed the lid and pried it open. My main water access pipe, the thick, old-style copper line coming up from underground, looked wrong. The color was off. The valve handle was stuck. And there, packed around the base of the valve and neck of the pipe, was cement. Not just hardened mineral scale. Actual, fresh, gray, gritty concrete poured directly into the housing and down the pipe neck. My heart skipped. I ran back to the garage, grabbed a flashlight and a pry tool, and scraped around the edge. The rough surface was unmistakable. It had been poured recently, likely within the last 48 hours. Someone had filled my main water access pipe with concrete. I stared at it, stunned. Then the phone rang. It was my neighbor, Gloria, from 3 houses down. "Hey," she said, "is your water out too?" I blinked. "Yeah, just found it. Thought it was a city thing." Me too at first, but I called utilities. They said there's no work being done. Before I could respond, I got a text from Brian, the guy across the street. You having a water outage? My sprinkler's dry and pressure tank is whining. I open my HOA group chat, usually a graveyard of yard sale listings and Karen's seasonal decor guidelines. But not today. 12 different neighbors were asking the same thing. Anyone know why we're dry? My taps are off. Kids couldn't shower this morning. What's going on? City says it's not on their end. I felt a chill. I looked back at the pipe, and I realized that line didn't just feed my house. It was the hub. It didn't make sense at first, but then I remembered something. During the home inspection years earlier, the plumber had mentioned a legacy junction, a type of old neighborhood plumbing design from the 1970s where one parcel got the main line and adjacent lots branched off using shared valves and backflow preventers. It had been phased out over time, but some older neighborhoods, like ours, still had it buried deep underground. I never thought much of it. Until now. I opened my home file and dug out the inspection notes. Sure enough, there it was. Property receives primary city water line, shared distribution junction believed to support lateral feeds to surrounding lots. Confirmed flow-through pressure valve feeding south and west. Translation: I was the neighborhood's water source. The HOA didn't know that when they filled my pipe. They just thought they were dealing with a non-compliant homeowner. But they had cut off the entire block. And now the phones were ringing, the pressure tanks were whining, and Karen's clipboard kingdom was collapsing, one dry faucet at a time. I didn't panic. I documented everything. I took photos of the pipe, time-stamped the damage, collected the concrete scrapings into a bag. Then I walked the block and asked a few quiet questions. One neighbor, newly moved in, mentioned seeing two men in safety vests near my curb earlier in the week. Another said they'd noticed Karen talking with a contractor in her driveway, gesturing toward my house. Then came the HOA newsletter. It arrived that afternoon, tucked into our mailboxes. Right there on page 2, water usage reminder. Residents are required to follow HOA-approved irrigation protocols. Unauthorized systems may result in corrective action. No signature, no specific name, but it didn't have to say Karen. I already knew. They had poured concrete into my pipe as punishment, sabotaged my property to make a point. And in doing so, they'd cut off their own water supply. I stood there on my lawn, hose limp, pressure tank quiet, neighbors confused, and I thought to myself, you wanted to make an example out of me? Now I would make one out of you. After the concrete discovery and the first few text messages about water outages, I knew this wasn't just personal anymore. It was structural. Someone had cut off the neighborhood's water access. That meant the consequences were bigger than inconvenience. They were criminal. But in a community like ours, the truth didn't speak for itself. I had to prove it. That meant maps, records, documents. Everything Karen's HOA had ignored in their quest to punish me. So I started at the source. The city utilities office was the logical first stop. It was Monday morning, and I walked in with a folder under my arm, a copy of my inspection report, and photos of the cement cap pipe. The clerk at the counter raised an eyebrow when I handed her the evidence. That's definitely not standard maintenance, she said. Let me pull your parcel file. 10 minutes later, I had the entire water infrastructure history of my lot printed and highlighted. The most important part? Parcel 198, designated as primary junction node for Zone 2, Legacy 1971 grid. Feeds 198B, 198C, 199A, 200A. In plain English, my water pipe was the distribution point for 5 other homes. While my line was working, the system functioned smoothly. But once the HOA cut it, everyone connected to it suffered. That explained why half the block had gone dry the same day my system was sabotaged. And now, I had it in writing. Next step, zoning. I went to the county's land records department, where an incredibly patient technician pulled zoning overlays dating back to the early 70s. I cross-referenced them with my parcel map, then matched that against current infrastructure schematics. That's when the full picture clicked into place. Our neighborhood had never been upgraded. The HOA had taken over when the area expanded in the 90s, but they'd never updated the utilities or built new infrastructure. They'd inherited a shared-use water system, designed for simplicity and cooperation. Not once had the HOA informed residents of their dependence on a hub-style layout, because most of them didn't even know it existed. The only thing they'd updated? The rules. Everything else? Still running on bones from 1971. Armed with these findings, I made a few quiet calls to neighbors. I didn't want to panic anyone. I wanted questions. I got them. A dozen homeowners, ranging from retirees to new families, began asking the same thing. If our water depends on that pipe, why didn't anyone tell us? Why did the HOA target you if that line is essential? Did they even know what they were doing? Some were polite. Some were furious. One guy, new to the area, immediately called the city's legal division and asked if he could file a claim against the HOA for endangering essential services. But the most important voice? The city's water department director, who returned my call that same afternoon. I reviewed your file, he said, and based on the infrastructure, you're correct. That parcel contains a legacy junction node. Cutting that line would drop pressure in every home west of the secondary valve. I asked him one simple question. Is that line legally protected? He didn't hesitate. If it services multiple homes, it qualifies as shared residential infrastructure. Any act of intentional sabotage would be considered tampering with a public utility, Class A misdemeanor, possibly a felony, depending on damage and intent. And that was all I needed to hear. I had property records. I had zoning overlays. I had statements from the city. Next, I requested an inspection team. They came out the following morning, 2 city utility officers with clipboards and reflective vests. They popped open my valve box, examined the cement, took photos, and collected core samples. This was deliberate, one of them said, and recent, within 72 hours, maybe less. The other nodded. You didn't do this yourself? I didn't even blink. Nope. I suspect the HOA. They exchanged glances. One of them made a note. We'll file a report, and we'll be recommending a full audit of this zone's distribution layout. Things were starting to move fast. By Thursday, I had copies of 3 separate reports. A zoning confirmation letter stating my parcel was the primary junction node. A water department memo confirming service disruption originated from that node. A preliminary findings report labeling the damage as intentional interference with essential infrastructure. I scanned them, printed duplicates, and hand-delivered packet to the HOA's mailbox with a note. You try to cut me off. Instead, you cut yourselves. The city is watching now, and so is everyone else. Karen never responded directly. But within 24 hours, another newsletter landed in everyone's inbox. Water interruption update. The HOA is aware of service disruptions and is investigating possible causes. Please remain patient while our community navigates these challenges together. No apology, no ownership, no mention of the pipe. Just the classic Karen tactic, deflect and delay. But residents weren't having it. Brian, the guy across the street, posted on the neighborhood app. I just found out my water came through protagonist this lot. So if they sabotaged him, they sabotaged us. Is this really how we're running the HOA now? That post got 43 comments in 2 hours. Some were stunned. Others were furious. Several asked for a town hall meeting. One suggested freezing HOA dues until answers were given. Another shared screenshots of the water department confirmation that it was a multi-home feed. And then came the real kicker. A long-retired civil engineer named Walt, who had lived in the neighborhood since 1980, uploaded a hand-drawn diagram of the original water flow layout. In big letters at the top, the pipe they filled is the heart of the system. That post broke the silence wide open. Residents demanded answers. Emails flew to the HOA inbox. Someone even created a survey titled, "Should the HOA be allowed near utilities again?" Karen responded exactly how I expected. She doubled down. In a follow-up post, she claimed my unauthorized system had compromised neighborhood reliability and that temporary corrective measures had been enacted. She used phrases like off-grid modification, uninspected irrigation, and non-standard curb housing, as if I had built the water network myself in a basement with stolen parts. But by then, it was too late, because the city spoke next. On Friday morning, An official statement from the Public Infrastructure Oversight Committee landed in every mailbox. An incident involving unauthorized tampering of a shared water system in the Lakeside View community is under formal review. Homeowners are advised not to alter or interfere with underground utility systems without prior municipal approval. Liability will be assessed accordingly. And at the bottom, service disruption originated at Parcel 198A, affecting 5 surrounding properties. Damage deemed intentional and non-accidental. That line hit like a tidal wave. Suddenly, it wasn't my word against the HOAs anymore. It was me in the city versus Karen and her clipboard. Neighbors began texting me directly. "You were right. This is insane. Do you need help taking it down? What can we do?" I told them the same thing. Just ask questions. Keep the pressure on. The truth will do the rest. Because by now, the sabotage wasn't just exposed. It was documented. Karen had overplayed her hand, and instead of silencing me, she'd woken the block. The HOA had gone from feared to ridiculed in a matter of days, all because they didn't understand the infrastructure they were tampering with. And now, the cracks were widening. By the time the city issued their public notice confirming that my pipe fed half the block and that the sabotage was deliberate, I had all the ammunition I needed. Now it was time to pull the trigger. I started with the City Utilities Department, where the damage had first been inspected. With their internal report in hand, I scheduled a follow-up meeting with the compliance officer who visited my property. He didn't waste time. "We've classified this as unlawful tampering with municipal infrastructure," he said. "That means we'll be filing citations against whoever is found responsible." I handed him my evidence binder, the same one I'd been updating daily. It included photos of the cement-filled pipe, screenshots of HOA emails referencing corrective measures, the neighborhood post where Karen claimed I was compromising system reliability, statements from neighbors confirming they saw individuals in vests near my curb. My original deed, showing the property, was the official distribution junction. He nodded. "This is plenty. We'll send it to the legal team." I thanked him and left. Then I went straight to the police department. At first, the desk sergeant raised an eyebrow when I described the situation. HOA sabotage, concrete and pipes, citywide impact. But once I explained the utility structure and shared the city's findings, his tone shifted immediately. "That's serious," he said. "Let me get an officer to take your statement." 20 minutes later, I was filing an official police report for property vandalism, a report that listed HOA officers as the primary suspects. I was clear and calm, walking them through the timeline and attaching all relevant documents. When they asked who authorized the sabotage, I didn't point fingers without evidence. But I quoted Karen's own newsletter. "Unauthorized systems may result in corrective action." That line alone raised eyebrows. The officer added it to the report and promised I'd receive a case number within 48 hours. Now, the ball was rolling. But I didn't stop there. I filed a code enforcement complaint with the local building department, citing improper and unlicensed work on a municipal access line. I also sent a packet to the state's board for HOA regulation compliance, flagging the HOA's abuse of authority and failure to assess utility risk before taking physical action. And I made one final call. Local news. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't shout. I just pitched the story like a concerned resident with a strange but important tale. Homeowner discovers water line sabotage by HOA. Turns out the pipe supplied 5 other homes. City confirms criminal investigation. That got their attention. They sent a reporter and a cameraman out the next morning. By the time they left, they had footage of the damaged valve, neighbor interviews, my inspection documents, and a statement from the city confirming the incident. The segment aired on the 6 p.m. broadcast that night under the headline, "Water Cutoff Sparks HOA Investigation. Resident's pipe served entire block." It blew up. Neighbors who'd previously stayed neutral suddenly started calling me, texting me, even stopping by to say I had no idea. Thank you. Some were stunned. Some were embarrassed they hadn't spoken out sooner. But nearly everyone was now furious. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be quiet. Instead, it was standing room only. Karen tried to open with the usual agenda. She barely got through the word "welcome" before Brian stood up. You gonna tell us why my family had a shower at the gas station last week? Karen blinked. There's an ongoing review. Gloria cut her off. Did you authorize anyone to pour cement into that pipe? No, got insnupped. Absolutely not. That was not an HOA-sanctioned action. I stood up and held up a printout of her own email. Corrective measures, I read aloud. You used that phrase to justify what happened. You can't walk that back now. She stammered. That was metaphorical. The room erupted in murmurs. That's when I passed around copies of the city's official notice. I had printed enough for every chair. The words were bold and direct. Intentional sabotage of a shared infrastructure pipe originating from Parcel 198A. Incident confirmed as deliberate. Legal review pending. No one spoke for a moment. Then Brian again. Did you know that pipe served my house, Karen? She didn't answer. You endangered every kid on this street, Naomi said. You could have contaminated the line. What if the city had fined us for waste or damage? Karen shook her head. This is all being twisted. This is an attack on community order. It's accountability, I said. Something you've avoided for too long. After the meeting, 3 board members stepped down. Quietly. No announcements. Just letters submitted to the city and confirmation posted to the HOA site the next day. Half the board gone in one night. By the following week, the city had issued 3 official citations. Tampering with infrastructure, unlicensed utility alteration, obstruction of shared water flow. All 3 were addressed to the HOA, with Karen's name on the presiding officer line. The fines weren't small, but worse than the money, the liability. If the city decided to pursue criminal charges for endangering essential services, Karen could be facing actual prosecution. And now, the press had picked up the story beyond just our town. An online version of the report made the regional news circuit. Comment sections flooded with reactions. Other homeowners from different states began sharing their own HOA horror stories in solidarity. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just the neighborhood tyrant. She was publicly exposed, and I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to threaten. I just had to show people the truth and give them permission to stop being afraid. Now, the HOA couldn't pass a single vote without being challenged. Residents demanded that all enforcement be paused. Dues were withheld pending an audit. And Karen? She was silent. No more newsletters. No more porch patrols. No more power. She'd made the mistake of treating my pipe like an isolated rebellion. She didn't know it was a lifeline, not just for water, but for proof. And once that proof started flowing, there was no shutting it off. Karen always imagined herself as untouchable. She had the clipboard, the board title, the backing of the HOA. She thought that gave her immunity. But when the pipes dried up, so did her protection. By the time the local news aired their second segment, this one titled, Neighborhood President Faces Vandalism Allegations After Water Pipe Sabotage, everything had changed. Residents weren't just frustrated now. They were angry, loudly, publicly, and unapologetically. The next HOA meeting was the first one in years to have full attendance. People showed up early, standing shoulder to shoulder in the community rec room. No one wanted to miss what came next. Karen walked in last. Her usual posture, shoulders straight, chin high, was replaced with a nervous stiffness. She avoided eye contact as she shuffled to the front, flanked by only 2 remaining board members. The room was electric with tension. She cleared her throat. I'd like to begin tonight's meeting by addressing the situation regarding the water incident. But she didn't even get through the first sentence before a hand shot up. Before you explain, said Brian, are you going to admit what you did? Karen blinked. I've already said, she started. You haven't said anything, Naomi interrupted. You've danced around it, sent veiled emails, and blamed unauthorized systems. But not once have you admitted that someone under your authority filled a pipe with concrete. Murmurs of agreement rolled through the room. Karen's voice rose in defense. We had no knowledge of the pipe being connected to other properties. We acted based on non-compliant landscaping and unregistered irrigation. The city proved you wrong, said Gloria, holding up the printed infrastructure notice. You didn't just damage one property. You endangered half this street. Karen's face flushed. Then maybe, she said sharply. Your anger should be directed at the homeowner who chose to operate outside the rules. His system created risk. That's when I stood up. The only risk, I said calmly, was the one your board created by acting without research, without permits, and without legal authority. I held up the city's letter, then the police report, then the HOA's own documentation showing no record of inspection or vote authorizing sabotage. The line you cut didn't belong to you. And now that the evidence is out, you're looking for someone to blame. The room fell into a heavy silence. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That's when the city made its entrance. 2 representatives from a municipal water oversight office were in the back row. One of them, a tall woman in a navy blazer, stood and calmly stepped forward. My name is Rachel Nguyen. I'm here on behalf of the City Water Department. We've concluded our preliminary investigation and found substantial cause to classify this as an incident of negligent infrastructure interference. Gasps echoed through the room. She continued, a temporary stop order has been placed on all HOA-related utility actions, pending further review. Additionally, we are issuing a compliance demand. The HOA must relinquish all involvement in water access and maintenance going forward. These responsibilities will be assumed under city jurisdiction. Translation? The HOA had just been stripped of its power over water. Karen tried to respond. She stumbled through words like oversight, historic precedent, and misunderstanding, but it didn't matter. Because no one believed her anymore. Her authority had evaporated. She didn't know it yet, but she was speaking from a podium that had already been dismantled. Over the next week, the fallout spread fast. 3 more board members resigned by email, citing stress and uncertainty regarding the legal implications. Their statements were brief, but they all distanced themselves from Karen, her decisions, and her lack of transparency. That left Karen alone. Just her, the title of president, and a room full of people who now saw her as a liability. It didn't take long before her final grip broke loose. The city sent a certified letter confirming that all HOA utility permissions had been revoked. The fines, originally 3 citations, grew to 5. A formal civil investigation was opened. And Karen? She disappeared. No more newsletters. No more patrols. No more HOA memos about mailbox height or grass length. At first, we thought she was laying low. But then the sign appeared in her front yard. For sale, by owner. Motivated seller. She didn't hold a goodbye meeting. She didn't send a resignation notice. She simply vanished, like her power. A few residents whispered that she left to avoid liability. Others said her attorney told her she could be held personally accountable for the concrete damage. One guy claimed to have seen her loading a moving truck before dawn. Either way, she was gone. And with her, so was the old HOA. The board couldn't meet quorum. Without quorum, no votes could be held. Without votes, no power remained. So the city stepped in again. They officially dissolved the board's enforcement arm and established a municipal oversight plan for shared utilities. Maintenance of common lines was transitioned to the city. Individual homes could now opt in or out of aesthetic programs. And most importantly, no more citations, no more fines, no more fear. In Karen's absence, the community didn't fall apart. It came together. A volunteer committee formed, not a new HOA, but a casual group of neighbors focused on beautification and communication. They shared resources, coordinated lawn care schedules, and even helped design a new digital bulletin board that actually respected people's privacy. Water pressure returned. So did trust. I didn't do it alone, but I did light the match. And every time someone watered their lawn, pressure washer in hand, laughing in the sun, I remembered just how close we came to losing it all, to a clipboard, a lie, and a pour of cement. In the end, Karen thought silencing me would strengthen her power. But all she did was expose how fragile it really was. And when the dust settled, the only thing that remained was the truth. Flowing, strong, and unstoppable. Just like the water. It's funny how something as simple as running water can become a symbol of power. For years, the HOA controlled our neighborhood through fear. Little threats, quiet fines, passive-aggressive letters disguised as reminders. Most people complied, not because they agreed, but because they didn't have the time or energy to fight. But then the water stopped flowing, and everything changed. In the weeks after Karen vanished and the board collapsed, the city made good on its promise. Utility engineers came out and mapped every inch of the aging infrastructure. They used modern tech, sensors, pressure gauges, digital flow meters to understand exactly how the network worked. And what they found confirmed everything I'd exposed. That the HOA had been relying on shared junctions, outdated connections, and informal control, all without legal authority or technical understanding. The city stepped in and restructured the system. Old lines were either upgraded or capped. A brand new junction node was installed 2 blocks over to ensure redundancy. Pressure issues were balanced. And best of all, the entire water system was placed under municipal oversight, severing the HOA's ability to ever interfere again. No more concrete, no more citations, just plumbing, professionally managed, legally protected, and fully independent. The effect on the neighborhood was immediate. Gone were the paranoid looks, the whispered complaints, the people too afraid to ask questions. In their place were real conversations. Hugs on the sidewalk, jokes about pressure politics, even block-wide barbecues where we laughed about the time the HOA president sabotaged her own street. People began stopping by my house, not with suspicion, but with gratitude. Naomi brought me cookies and said, "We didn't just fix the pipe, you fixed the fear." Brian installed new sprinklers and said, "I water my lawn now with pride." One retired neighbor I barely knew told me, "You turned your house into a fortress, and not with walls, with facts." The city even invited me to speak briefly at a zoning board meeting about outdated utility oversight. I gave them copies of everything I'd compiled and encouraged them to audit every HOA in the region for the same issues. The story spread beyond our block, and slowly, the culture changed. Instead of letting power be hoarded, we shared it. The community formed a voluntary cooperative, not to enforce aesthetics, but to collaborate. People could contribute if they wanted, funding common flower beds, organizing cleanup days, or helping neighbors with maintenance. No fines, no threats, no rules, just community. The HOA's name faded into memory. No one bothered to revive it. The mailbox, once plastered with rules, was repainted and turned into a book exchange. The lawn, once cited for non-uniform texture, became the winner of our unofficial Most Creative Native Garden contest. As for my home, it became a symbol, not of rebellion, but of resilience. Where fear had once tried to take root, ownership stood firm. Not the kind you buy with money or titles. The kind you earn by not backing down. Every time someone turned on their faucet, pressure perfect and water flowing, they remembered. Not out of spite, but out of pride. We'd survive concrete control, and we'd come out stronger. Sometimes it's just plumbing, a pipe, a valve, a quiet system doing its job beneath your feet. And sometimes it's a pressure line that bursts a bully's entire system. Karen thought cutting off my water would cut off my resolve. She thought one act of sabotage would make me fold, apologize, and conform. But what she didn't know was that the pipe she filled with concrete wasn't just mine. It served her house too. And when the water stopped, so did her control. She ended up dry, exposed, and out of excuses. Not because I shouted, not because I fought fire with fire, but because I did the one thing people like her never expect. I documented, I reported, and I let the truth flow louder than the threats. So if your HOA tries to intimidate you, don't panic. Don't waste your breath arguing with a clipboard. Just gather the facts. Call the city. Let the law do what it was built to do. Protect what's rightfully yours. Because in the end, Karen didn't lose because I was louder. She lost because I was right. And I wasn't afraid to prove it. If someone tries to bury your rights under concrete, show them you've got the tools to break through and the truth on tap.